And I was the top student. And it's funny because in the entire school there were only two non-white. So I was a black French, and the other person was from Madagascar. And at the end, the top two students, I was first and the Malagasy was second. So this is how it started, and then I continued, and then decided to go back to Martinique after my studies. But by that time, the island had become too small for me. So I stayed there for about 1 year and told my parents that I wanted to go back to Paris, and I returned to Paris and started to work in France. But at the time, I also wanted to go to study to the US, and it's always very expensive. So I applied for a scholarship from the foundation, the Rotary Foundation. I think that you have that because they provide scholarships all over the world. So you may want to inquire about that also in due time. And I finally got the scholarship to go to the US, but from the chapter of the Caribbean, not from the mainland. And it is not a scholarship to get a degree. You are an ambassador of your country for about 10 months. And you are supposed to go and do lectures, talk about your country, what is there, and so forth. So I did that, and finally I decided to stay to pursue a degree. And this is how I obtained my master's in business administration. But I forgot to mention to you that before that I had already obtained my CPA, my Chartered Accountant degree in France, and I was one of the youngest one, I think, to get it. And when I got my my master's in the US, I decided to either work for a French company in the US or come back to France and work for an American company, because by that time I had both the French degree and American. I knew both systems, so I was going to stay in corporate world, focusing on that. And I came back to France and started to apply for jobs with this specification, when actually I was approached by a French school who, it was a business school, who wanted to basically provide support to the government of Burundi to establish a business school. So for some reason I was attracted by that, because I forgot to mention to you that when I was at my school in Nantes, I did my internship in Gabon, because I had the possibility to do my internship in Martinique. My parents had found an internship for me, but of course, you know, I was a little bit rebel in my style. So I said, no, I'm going to find it myself, because it's going to be far away. So it was in Africa, in Gabon. So it was in 1997. So you see, it's a long time. 1977, sorry. And after that, I finally was asked to develop this business school in Burundi, and this is where I really got in touch with the development area, you know, supporting government. And I discovered the World Bank there, because it was financed by the European Union. And I met colleagues from the World Bank, and they said, oh, I know, you know, the World Bank would need somebody like you. And I said, well, I am not sure that I want to work with the World Bank at that time. I really like to be on the field, so I spent a couple of years in Burundi. Then I went back to Paris, and I was a freelance consultant. And after that, I was again approached by the government of Togo to provide support in privatization, which I did for a few years, and it was quite interesting. And again, I was in touch with the World Bank, because it was really the early 90s where most African countries had started to privatize their public enterprises. So there was a lot of demand in public enterprises, structuring, privatization. And finally, again, the bank approached me. And this very second time I accepted. And since that time, I started as a consultant and a 12-month contract. And it's been 20 years now. In the bank, I did a lot, various activities, supporting privatization, private sector development. I also helped develop the regional integration program in the continent, and this is our very large program, our largest program, because there's a recognition that a number of African economies are very small. So they can only make it if they work within a regional framework, such as ECOWAS. You know ECOWAS, right? Or CIMAC or SADC in Southern Africa. So I helped the World Bank develop that. And then after that, I was asked to take the lead in the largest program financed by the World Bank with the private sector, which was the development of oil in Chad. They had discovered that Chad had oil, but to develop it, they had to build a very long pipeline because, as you know, Chad is landlocked. And if you are going to export the oil, you have to go to the ocean. So they had to build a 1,200 kilometer pipeline, oil pipeline, from the south of Chad all the way to Cameroon, to the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. And we helped finance the infrastructure, particularly, and also finance the contribution of the government, because it was a $4 billion project that was essentially financed by the private sector, but we helped put in place the system. We are talking of governance, how oil money was going to be managed, transparency in the flow of funds, knowing what is the production and so forth. And then after that, I became a country director first for the two Congos and then Congo. So a very interesting career, very eclectic. I did very different things. But as I told you, the key element that you may retain is you have to search for excellence all the time. You have to be hardworking. You have to really be focused and not be discouraged. Because I'm always telling my colleagues, even with the bank, hard working is really paying all the time. And you also need to have strong ethical values. You know, you need to have your values. And I'm sure that you all have your values, but you need to nurture them to continue. If you have that, there is no doubt that you will all succeed. Does any one of you wants to work for the World Bank one day? Who would like to work for the World Bank? How many?